checked if the session's recorded. That's brilliant. Thank you, because I've just switched on the recording, so I will share that later. So reflect on your academic course and think in terms of, so what was really interesting to me? What projects did I do? Did I do any field work, any placements? What can I write about those things? Also think then in terms of, what does this show about me? What does this demonstrate in terms of my skills? Did I work on a team project? Did I have a leadership role within that? What did I achieve? So what were the outcomes from that? Employers are always really interested in understanding not just what you did, but why you did it, and did you do it well? So start asking yourself those more sort of in-depth questions, and that will start to draw out some of the really interesting things that will help your CV or application to stand out. So work experience, and I think that one of the topics we discussed in the employer panel was, a lot of people have had their work experience opportunities disrupted by the past sort of 15 months events, and so what counts as work experience? And the answer is very much that any kind of work experience counts. It doesn't need to be paid. It can be volunteering. It can be short-term, long-term. It can be part-time, casual jobs. It all counts, because it's all about you in that environment and thinking about how you function, what your strengths are, and what is the impact that you have had. So drawing out all of the work experience you've had is a really useful exercise to go into as well. Also think about interests and activities as well. So lots of you will have been members of student societies or external societies. You might have strong interests around around any sort of sporting activities or creative activities or other things. Perhaps you're politically active and you campaign on a particular issue. Again, think about how this sits within your CV. What does it show about you? I've worked a lot with environmental students in the past, who often might not have sort of formal paid work experience, but might have been involved in volunteer groups or conservation groups, or perhaps they have a strong affinity with the outdoors and do a lot of mountaineering or climbing. All of these things can be relevant on your CV. So think beyond just the education and the work experience. What else is it that you're offering? And you also, of course, need to draw in more sort of details if you have particular sort of academic awards or other achievements. Perhaps you have additional technical skills that you've developed outside of your course. So all of these things could potentially go into your CV or your application to demonstrate your suitability. I would also then suggest that you take a look at a sort of typical job advert for the sorts of areas that you're interested in. And I've chosen quite a simple example here, because, as I said right at the beginning, the purpose of the application is to get you an interview. It's to get you an opportunity to get into the process and talk further with that employer. But to be able to do that, you need to really understand what it is that they're looking for. So I'd like you to have a read through this job specification. It's very brief, and just put in the chat box anything that you can see that you might need to reflect back. So in terms of what is the employer looking for here? What do they want? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to read that and put in as many things as you can into the chat box. All right, fantastic. So there's lots of ideas there about some of the things that they want. And what you've rightly picked up on is it's not just about the sort of measurable kind of capabilities. You know, it's not just about sort of having your 2-1 degree classification that, you know, which may or may not be a requirement in some industries. But it's also all those other skills which and abilities and attributes which are a little bit harder to measure. So when you've gone through the sort of job specification, and I think, you know, I'm sort of old school. I like to print it out and go through it with a highlighter, but you can also do this online. This will then just emphasize the things that you really need to be thinking about and get you in the right frame of mind for then writing your application to address a particular industry or a particular type of role. There's a lot in there, I think. You know, there's a lot of clues in that particular sort of description around, you know, commercial awareness, somebody creating value, somebody who is, you know, taking initiative, making decisions. All of these things are about the way that you are in work and your suitability in a particular type of organisation that, you know, is, you know, this is clearly a highly commercial role. So understanding the nature of what you're applying for can get you into the right frame of mind to start reflecting back, and maybe even including some of this language in your application as well. So you've done your research and you've got all your information, and then you need to think about, how am I going to actually present this in, for example, in a CV? And if you go online and search, there are probably millions of different layouts and templates that you could use. And I would, again, take a bit of a step back and think, okay, how do I need to organize my information here? So what do I need to do to make sure that my most relevant information stands out and is really obvious and clear to the reader, so they can immediately see that I'm a good match, I'm a good fit for what they're looking for. So the CV on the left is, you know, it's very presentable, it's a nice structure, it has an objective at the top, and then it goes into education and experience. So it's quite a sort of traditional kind of layout and format for a CV, and it's absolutely fine. Equally, the structure on the right is fine. One difference I would like to point out is that on the CV on the right has grouped experience into environment experience. And this is a technique that we often encourage students to use. If you have lots of experience which is highly relevant to the role that you're applying for, see if you can group it together and give it a headline that the employer can relate to. So, for example, if you're applying for an information technology role, you might have a section on IT experience, and then you would pull all of that experience together. You'd usually put it in reverse chronological order, so the most recent first, and you can put that quite high up on your CV. You need to have your other information about your experience on there as well. So you could then have an additional experience section lower down. And often that then has the effect of really presenting somebody who has lots of you know, sort of relevant interests and experiences that the employer will want to see. You can also draw in different types of experience as well. So if you had a section which was IT experience, you could perhaps draw in some project work from your course, or perhaps you have done some additional training. You could draw all sorts of things into there. So you know, if you're thinking about grouping things a little bit differently on your CV, have a chat with a careers consultant, and we can really help you to sort of individualize that and to make sure that you present that really well. I said right at the beginning that I was also going to sort of cover things that we notice as careers consultants that people find tricky with CVs and applications. And one of the things that I think people find really hard is writing effectively about the experiences that they've had. And you'll also remember that I talked right at the beginning about employers being able to really understand what it was that you did almost being able to picture in their mind, so that they can visualize what your impact was and what you were actually doing. Well, this is a really effective technique for helping you to be a much more memorable candidate. Certainly here in Edinburgh, employers will get lots of CVs that say, worked at Edinburgh Fringe venue. Okay, and your experience of working at an Edinburgh Festival Fringe venue could be very different to somebody else's. But this statement doesn't tell us anything about what that experience was like. So I like to use the advice to think in terms of quantify, use context, and think about your outcomes. And in the after section there, you'll see what happens when we apply those 3 ideas to that statement. So afterwards, it becomes member of an effective team of 5, so we're quantifying, providing a range of customer services, so that's your context and your background information, booked festivals and manage smooth transition of audiences of up to 250 people that change over time between events. That's your outcomes. What did you do well? So I hope you can see from that really simple example, by applying quantifying, context and outcomes to your bullet points, you can then start to write much more effective and interesting statements. I'm just going to go quickly over a few details around sort of when you're writing your CV, and these are kind of conventions that that employers would expect to see on a CV. So no more than 2 pages of A4 usually. There are some exceptions around certain, for example, for academic CVs, if you're a PhD student and you have a lot of research and conferences, you would have a longer CV, and that's absolutely fine. There are some sort of industries where there are sort of different versions of CVs which they might use for clients, which would look a bit different and might be longer. But for your purposes, for most people, 2 sides of A4, it doesn't need to be any longer than that. And I wonder, there's always stories about and studies into how long employers actually look at your CV. Would anyone like to take a guess at how long employers spend looking at your CVs? And try perhaps in terms of seconds. Any idea how many seconds they would look? Less than 10 seconds? I think that's probably about right, because it depends on the employer. If they haven't had many CVs through, then they might spend a lot longer. But for recruiters who are getting perhaps dozens of CVs for one particular job, typically it's going to be less than 10 seconds that they will spend looking at that CV. So I hope that sort of really shows you how important it is that they can immediately get the information they need. And because of that, a lot of the information on the right hand side, partly because mostly because of equality rules around recruitment, you shouldn't be including things like date of birth, gender, marital status and so on, that personal information, but also it's just not relevant to the recruitment process. So keep the information simple at the top of your CV, get straight into the detail that they'll be really interested to see. I've talked about putting reverse chronological order, having the most recent first. Again, it's sort of for ease of reading, but also your most recent achievements, whether they're in work or whether they're in study, are likely to be the most relevant. If that doesn't quite work with you, perhaps you have an unusual, sort of slightly out of the ordinary, sort of process through university, or perhaps you've been working, if you don't feel it's representing you very well, then talk to a careers consultant and we can help you to come up with some ideas on how you can present yourself really well on your CV in a way that reflects what you uniquely have to offer. Try and avoid large chunks of unbroken text. With those sort of under 10 seconds potentially, the employer just won't have the time to read through that, and it may be off-putting to them. But also remember that the appearance and having a sort of good balance between text and white space is also important, with a sort of consistent structure through the CV so that it's really easy to read. I mean, lots of people do use templates, but I usually advise people just to make up their own structure that fits their information, and then you can make it look attractive. You can use templates for inspiration on how to set that up, and then save it as a PDF so you've got a nice file that you can send on. So I'm just going to very briefly touch on writing a cover letter, because this is just as important as your CV. And what your cover letter does is it points to your CV and tells the employer the bits that are really relevant for the job that they're recruiting for. And so it's addressing all of the essential requirements. It's also going to reflect your interest in the employer and your interest in the role. And anything else that is going to be useful for them to know. So think about it as a 3-document process. You might have the job description in the middle, and then on one side you have the CV, on the other side you have the covering letter. The covering letter will point to the job description and say, I see that you're looking for this, and then it will point to your CV and it will say, look at my CV, because I have this experience that directly relates to this. And then you can expand on it in your covering letter. It should be no more than 1 page of A4 and about 4 to 5 short, concise paragraphs. And you will need to write and rewrite your cover letter until you're really happy with the flow. So make sure that when you're doing this for the first time that you speak to a careers consultant, and we do sort of fantastic quick 15-minute sessions where you can get immediate feedback on your cover letter and your CV and applications and your LinkedIn profile, and we can give you really sort of sound advice on how you might be able to improve. But don't be surprised if it takes you sort of 4 or 5 drafts to really get it to a point where you're happy with it. If you have a look on our website, you'll see that there is sort of lots of information on there as well. So do go to our website, and there's sections on CVs and covering letters and application forms as well. So there's loads of advice, and I'll send these slides out afterwards so that you've got all of this detail and all of these links. I've put in a couple of others there, other sites which I think which I use a lot with students and graduates, and hopefully you'll find really helpful as well. There's a lot of advice out there, and you need to make sure that the advice you use is specific to the country you're applying to, and also that it's up to date and it's really giving you the most relevant advice for you. If you're applying in other countries, if you go to the Prospects website, that's the middle link there, they have a section on country profiles. So if you want to know how CVs and applications will differ in different countries, you can click on the country of your choice, and there's a section there on applying sort of applications in that country. And some countries will have different conventions around things like having a photograph on your CV, for example. It's not usual in the UK context, but it is in some other countries. And also some of that other sort of personal information as well. So on to applications, and I'm just going to sort of say a little bit in the next sort of 10 minutes or so about sort of making applications, how you can improve your applications and really sort of succeed in the process. So so applications, again, it's sort of very similar sort of principles, but they're looking for your understanding of the job and organisation. And for anyone who was along at the employer panel this morning, there's a real emphasis being placed on the research part. Make sure you've done your research in advance and that you really have sort of internalised what the employer is about. You know, what are their values? What's the workplace like? You know, what sort of strengths are they looking for in employees? I'm really sorry if you can hear the dog barking in the background there. She's been rather noisy, and but sort of bear with me. Hopefully it will stop in a moment. So when you're when you're thinking about applications, one thing that we've noticed as careers consultants is that the processes have changed over the past few years. So you do still have sort of quite lengthy application forms online where there are lots of sections to fill in. But it's really on a scale now with so much more automation in the process. There are a lot more sort of quicker application processes as well, where you would take a series of, you would register, you might link up with your LinkedIn profile, and then all the information gets transferred into your form. There may be some virtual exercises, even some sort of gaming-based exercises as well, and that can really reduce the time spent on the application process. But I think that can be slightly deceptive. You still need to do your research. You still need to make sure that anything that you do put into your application is really addressing the requirements of the employer. So spend a bit of time, not just on their website, but connect with them on LinkedIn, follow their social media, attend any events they're going to. All of these will give you additional information, and that's all about giving you an advantage in the application process, because you will understand more, you won't be rehashing what they've got on their website, and that will show your enthusiasm and how serious you are about working for that particular employer. I've put a note there as well to say that sometimes the way that systems have been automated means that people get sifted out of the process very quickly, and sometimes that can feel unfair if you have mitigating circumstances. Perhaps there were issues that affected your results, or perhaps you have a disability. If that's if that's the case, and you think you have circumstances that an employer needs to know about, then do make contact with the recruitment team. And all the employers that we talk to these days are really open to hearing from you and having that conversation beforehand, so that when your application is received, they can take that in the process. If you have a disability and you're not sure how to put that on an application form, or even if you should put that on an application form, because many candidates choose not to, I can highly recommend a session that's running later this morning by Employability, who will be discussing all of those matters. So that was going to be really helpful for you. So before we finish, I'm going to touch on a couple of different types of application questions, because although there are shorter forms out there, there are still sort of lengthy application forms that people need to fill in. And the first one, which I think a lot of people will have come across, is competency-based questions. So do you remember when we went back to the job description for Philips, and we were looking at the skills and attributes that they were looking for? Well, if an employer is looking for those attributes and those skills, it's perfectly reasonable for them to then ask you if you possess them. And they often do this through using competency questions. So you do still see these on application forms. Particularly be aware of this if you're applying into public sector and government type jobs, where these are used very extensively throughout the whole recruitment process. And so there's a couple of examples of those types of questions. So if you hear a question, if you see a question on a form, or you hear a question in an interview that says, describe a time, or tell me about a time, that is your clue that you need to think STAR. Now, this may be familiar to some of you, but I'm just going to very briefly go through this structure. And I would really recommend that you read up on this and you practice, especially for interviews, which I'm sure Lorraine will touch on in a moment. The STAR is situation, task, action, result, and it gives you a fantastic structure to talk about your experience. So the situation, that's an introduction to what the situation was. The task focuses in on the issue or the problem. The action, which is the bulk of your answer, that talks about what you did. And the result is the outcome. You can also use reflection in result as well. So sometimes employers will want you to include that as well. So let's see how this looks in reality. I'll give you about sort of 30 seconds or so just to read through this, but the different colours, hopefully you can see that at the top we've got the situation, it moves on to the task, the green paragraph in the centre is the action, and then the blue paragraph at the bottom is the result. So I'll just give you 30 seconds to read through that to get an idea of how this works. Okay, so hopefully you've got the idea there of how you would write about your experience. And again, this is quite a simple example. You can get feedback on writing these. Generally on an application form, you typically be about sort of 250 words or so that you would have to write about that sort of experience. But so I'm just introducing that idea, but I would really recommend that you do read up on the STAR structure and find out a little bit more about that. So the second type of questions that I wanted to address just briefly is the sort of motivational further information questions. These are the ones that read, please supply additional information to support your application, e.g. practical experience, voluntary activities, reasons for applying and any other details. Or it might just say, please give any other information here. Never leave this blank. This is such a good opportunity to then sort of fill in the gaps, but also to reinforce some of the other things that you've been saying about your strengths and your abilities. So when you are answering this type of question, think in terms of why you're a good candidate, and also why is this organisation a good fit for you. You can even engage bits of the STAR approach as well, the situation, task, action and result, to briefly sort of explain some of the things that you've done. So it's an opportunity really quite similar to a cover letter to point to the job and point to your application and say, you see this bit on my application, it's really relevant to your job because of this, and it's about reinforcing. So be selective with the information that you put in there, and think about how well it's reflecting back, and it's sort of going back to that job specification that we looked at right at the beginning. How well is it reflecting that? And when the employer reads it, does that make you a good fit for the job? Again, it can be really hard to be objective about this when you're writing your own information. So get some feedback, and you might want to come along to one of the drop-in sessions with your careers consultant later to talk about them with this, because it is a technique. It's a different writing technique that you need to learn for job seeking, and we can give you a lot of help with that. So that is a real kind of whistle-stop tour on applications and CVs. And as I said right at the beginning, there's so much we can say about this, and we do run regular sessions which are much more focused around sort of applications and CVs and go into a lot more detail. But I really hope that's given you some resources and some ideas, and really just a sort of theme in terms of understanding yourself is a really good starting point. And being able to back up those strengths and skills that you have with some solid evidence is the thing that will take you a long way in the application process. So if you have any quick questions, please put them in the message box. We'll also be really happy to take those at the end of the session as well. So I'll give you a moment, just have a think if you have any questions, and just pop them in the chat box if you do. And luckily the dog stopped barking now, so I'm sorry about that earlier on. I think she's very, very bored. Okay, so no questions at the moment. We are going to take a brief 5-minute break, and Lorraine will be back at 10:45 to talk more with you about interviews. Thanks very much, folks. Hi, Eleanor. Yeah, you had a question about the appointments. Did you want to speak privately with someone about that, or are you happy for me to put your mic on? I'm really sorry on that. I can't actually switch your microphone on there. Do you want to, you can either sort of pop your question into the chat, or you could email me later. It's s.innes@hw.ac.uk. I'll put that
Hi,
in.
Sarah. I've just changed the settings really quickly, so I'm wondering whether we can
Oh, thanks, Keith.
I think I can use my microphone now. Yes,
go.
I see the microphone button appearing. Thank you, thank you. Good, Sarah. Thank you. So my main question was that I booked the CV check session before, and unfortunately it's quite brief to talk about anything substantially, really. So I'm wondering the longer appointments. What kind of issues can we approach you during those appointments? Is it preparation for interview, potential interview questions, or is it something else? Because I was a little bit confused from the description in the website.
Okay, Keith, do you want to take that question?
Hi, it's actually going to be a really simple answer. Those half-hour sessions we can use to talk about literally anything you want to in terms of, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right through to I've got an interview coming up next week. And if you feel that you want a little bit of extra time with an application or a CV or whatever, and you feel it's going to take a little bit longer, then don't hesitate to book that half-hour appointment. That's not a bother.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Kit.
Is that okay, Elena? Yeah.
And Sarah.
We'll try and have a little look at the description maybe as well and see what we can do.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Cool. What I might do, if it's okay, I'm going to go back into the system and turn off the mics again, just for now, if that's okay.
Great. Thanks, Keith.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased to welcome you along to our follow-up session this morning on preparing for virtual interviews. And my name's Lorraine Chambers. I'm one of the career consultants in the team at Careers and Graduate Futures. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for joining us. I know some of you are joining late in the day, some are early in the day because of the different time zones with Dubai, Malaysia and the UK. So thank you very much. I'm going to switch my camera off, but I'll come back on at the end and I'll be speaking to you. So I hope you can hear me well. So give me a wave if you're the hardcore, if you've been here every day this week at the boot camp. Well done on on sticking with us. We really hope you're finding these sessions really practical, really invaluable advice and support for kind of transitioning from university out into the big wide world. So it's fabulous to be here this morning. So I know that this morning you will have heard some superb inside tips from the employer panel, and I'm sure they were really, really worthwhile hearing from the horse's mouth, so to speak, all the tips. And you've also been hearing from Sarah, my colleague, on looking good on paper or at application stage. So this is the last formal kind of session from career consultants this morning on interviews. So let's imagine you've really impressed them all on paper or online, and now it's your chance to articulate your motivation and your interest and suitability at interview. So my background before joining the careers team about 14 years ago was actually as a graduate recruiter for a global blue chip technology and engineering firm. So I'm kind of drawing on that experience as well as I'm talking to you this morning. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we start. The session is being recorded, so all of you who have registered for this session today on Grad Futures will receive the slides afterwards and also a link through to the recording. And as you know, there's a chat box for messages, so please pop in any questions informally, you know, as we go along, and one of us will be able to answer them. Alternatively, if you've got something you've thought of afterwards, you're watching this recording, not live, you know, you can certainly email me there, l.s.chambers@hwu.ac.uk. Okay, so as I said, this morning's session is going to be a very practical overview, really, of techniques and skills to really arm yourself with and to practice, to really build your confidence in presenting yourself formally to employers at interviews. We are going to focus on virtual interviews. I'm going to talk about delivery in terms of virtual delivery because, as you know, at the moment that's the way it's going, and will continue to go. But first and foremost, I would like to say, you know, having been an interviewer, interviewers are only human, and it's people who recruit people. So it's really important to start off, you know, with thinking about presenting yourself with the right attitude. You know, you're soon to be kind of professionals, flying the nest from Harriet Watt. It's really important that you see yourself as professionals and you come across enthusiastically. You could be being assessed to be a future kind of ambassador for the company. You know, they'll be looking at your kind of team fit. We're all working, you know, virtually across borders, cross cultures. So it's really important that, you know, you have that really positive self-belief and attitude. It's also really important that you know yourself well, and you know, I'm hoping that many of you have tuned into my colleague Lindsay Wilson's session on really recognising your strengths and skills and understanding, you know, the graduate attributes that you bring to the workplace through all the degrees that you have been studying at Heriot-Watt. It's really important that if you've done that piece really well, you're a really good match for that company. That will really shine really credibly and genuinely to the employer, because you'll be telling your personal story with conviction. Thirdly, we're going to cover off, the importance of really knowing that job, as Sarah touched upon in her application session, and also really knowing that organisation well. Employers know that you'll be interviewing for a number of different organisations, but they really want to see that you've done your homework, you've done your research, and you really want to be there. We're going to look this morning at some very typical kind of graduate interview questions, formats and techniques for you to really take away and work with practically, and then come and kind of meet with us individually, one-to-one at our appointments, to really hone that kind of technique further for the interviews that I'm sure you'll be getting invited to soon. And we're also going to talk about preparing for virtual delivery. So well done, everybody. We're going to imagine now that you've impressed them all on paper, and you've been invited to that interview stage. So we're going to start as we mean to go on, and acknowledge that that interview invite in a professional, efficient, and very kind of positive way, saying how much you're looking forward to them. I apologise, my dog's barking, so bear with me on that. So yes, you really have to think about starting as you mean to go on. We're now going to start covering off what we know from employers are very typical types of graduate interview kind of format. So we'll kind of start off each one and kind of go through kind of little techniques for you to use moving forward. Okay, so the first kinds of question that you could typically be expected to kind of answer are all around the decision-making questions. So, why did you decide to study for a particular degree? What made you decide to apply for this particular job? Or why do you want to work for us in particular? So I would like to emphasize, there's not such a thing as, perfect kind of answers here. It's got to come from your kind of own research, and it's got to come from kind of a logical kind of thought process, that kind of thinking. That's what the employer is looking for, your own personal kind of stance. So what we recommend here is that you kind of have some kind of overall kind of aim, in terms of, what your kind of aim is, in terms of the decision for the job or the kind of the course, and really be able to clarify to the employer, for you personally, what are your most important criteria. So where did that kind of strong, interest come from? What were your kind of thoughts? Was your thought process? What were your logical reasons for your decision? Obviously, it's not about making decisions on a whim. Really taking time. This is a serious kind of matter. Your kind of career journey. So you need to treat it with respect and just kind of be able to articulate logical, rational thoughts for your decisions. So let's imagine, you're asked, well, why are you applying for this particular, what made you decide to apply for this particular job? So a recommended technique for this type of question at an interview would be, first of all, to overall explain the kind of job or career goal that you have, and then be able to articulate the most important criteria for you. So, reading that job advert, what really stood out, what jumped out at you, what were the key elements of that particular job that really attracted you? The employer will be impressed if you're able to kind of really draw upon that. and show you've understood the job advert, you've done your research, and you have realistic expectations about what the job entails. So if you watch kind of videos online of kind of current graduates working in the roles, I've spoken to them at career events, have you really understood what elements, really appeal to you? And then the next point is something that often we find when we're working with students or graduates, that they can really miss this, and it can kind of let them down at interviews. It's so important that you then take the time to link yourself to that job and think, where's the evidence coming from of your interest? So we've all done different things. You've all been on different journeys and had different experiences, at university. So really be thinking, what are the kind of need to know things with that employer that will help you stand out? So is it particularly like relevant course modules or projects or a dissertation topic that you've done that can demonstrate your strong interest? What are your key strengths? So this goes back to the job advert criteria, and Sarah was talking about this previously on the application session. But how are you really clear, what their essential and desirable criteria are? And surprise, surprise, those are your, some of your real strengths. But how can you demonstrate those strengths? You can draw on work experience. It could be relevant work experience, or it could be part-time work, or it could be volunteering. So for the employer, they don't mind, what the kind of experience is, so long as you can make it relevant and transferable to the role requirements. It could also be extracurricular activities. You could have had a position on a student society, help set up an event, organise a social media campaign for student union. It could be any of these things that you can draw upon. Okay, so I hope that kind of clarifies that kind of question. We're now going to move on to another typical kind of question you would get in an interview, which is really to test your knowledge. Have you done your homework? So it could be, what do you know about our organisation? What challenges does our company face at this particular time? Or what sets us apart from our competitors? So in terms of the knowledge questions, it's absolutely essential that you've done your research. They're not expecting you to regurgitate, their website, but be really led by, what you're kind of personally kind of interested in, and think of 2 or 3 key things that really stood out to you from the kind of the research organisation. So things that you can do, and obviously in order to further research the company, is we'd wholeheartedly recommend you follow them on social media. I'm sure after yesterday's session on online branding, you're all getting up to speed on kind of using LinkedIn, and obviously there's all the other kind of social media platforms as well that organisations use to kind of update everyone on their kind of latest news, products, services, wins, awards. It could be that you've spoken to an employer at a recruitment event or career fair. So for example, next week there's a big Scottish virtual fair for all students at all Scottish universities, run by Edinburgh University, that we've been promoting, all the career consultants have been promoting. So it could be that you have spoken to them. So use that, definitely use that, those nuggets of key kind of key information and things that you found out personally by talking to representatives. That will really impress the employer. Obviously there's recruitment material, there's their news sites as well. So just have 2 or 3 kind of interesting kind of stories to say about your kind of what's impressed you about the company. So an example, what do you know about us? If that was the question. So how did you find out about them? How did you research them? So don't be, backwards, just be quite open in terms of what kind of platforms you use to kind of find out about them. They'll be impressed that you've taken the time and effort, and it's sending those positive signals to the employer about your motivation and your interest. So be prepared to really state what in particular appeals to you about what they do and who they are. Okay, so we're wanting to avoid all cliches, sweeping generalizations. You know, I want to work for a large international retailer. So we're really looking at kind of making it credible and specific. So there'd be particular products or services that they offer that particularly appeal to you, and also say why. Something, you know, that stood out to them, you know, that try and obviously say something that you really do feel passionate, and it will come across very credibly. Also think about the importance of kind of their values and their culture. So there's a lot, employers are doing a lot of work and kind of putting up on their kind of websites and kind of social media, you know, about these topics, and more and more in speaking to students, you know, these are really important kind of things when thinking about kind of organizational fit and who's right for them. So be aware of what your own values and kind of motivations are, and to try and kind of match them across as well. The next type of question, which 9 times out of 10 will come up a graduate style of interview, will be, I think Sarah touched upon it earlier, was the competency style of questioning. So this is based on the premise of past performance is a good predictor of future performance. So the kind of question style will be very much along the lines of, give me an example of a time when, or tell me about a time when. And a competency is just another kind of, it's an HR term, if you like, for skill. So it could be something, well, we've listed some examples here. So it could be, for example, problem solving, it could be influencing, it could be working in teams, it could be leading, and it could be time management. What you really need to do is, I like the traditional way of working as well, and it's about going through that job or advert with a fine-tooth comb and really getting your highlighter out and identifying likely competencies from that job advert, so you can be you know, really well prepared and know, well, those are the criteria that the employer has. Their recruitment process, their interview process will be designed to assess those particular criteria. Okay, so it's really important you're very clear what those competencies are. It's also really important that you think about using a wide variety of examples. Okay, so the employer's not just looking for examples from university, they very much are, you know, looking for examples also from the workplace and from extracurricular activities and interests and hobbies and things as well. So just try and think of the broadest range of examples. It's always then about using your best story to fit the question. Okay, so obviously we do not recommend in advance, you know, preparing pre-scripted answers. Your answers need to come across very naturally, you know, in that interview, but it is good to kind of think about, you know, what are the competencies that are required for this particular job, and a pool of kind of evidence that you can draw upon from these three different areas of your life. 9 times out of 10, what the employer is kind of really testing is, you know, your kind of ability to kind of solve problems and kind of use initiative in these examples. So they kind of can often ask, you know, about difficult situations that you've been in, challenging situations, you know, when, let's face it, you know, our character is tested, but we can often learn the most. So they're not looking for perfect scenarios, they're looking for you to draw upon your experience, and as graduates they're looking for your ability to learn and reflect. They're looking for your raw potential. All right, so they're not looking for the perfect situations that you've been in. That's not it at all. So another acronym that you may wish to use, STAR is obviously one, is SITAR, to kind of structure your competency answer in a kind of logical way, but to ensure that you can provide the detail that the employer is looking for. Okay, because they basically have, if I just explain it as a recruiter, a definition of what good looks like for each of their competencies, and they will have a list of positive behaviours associated with each competency and negative behaviours associated with each competency. So it's really important that if you follow this structure, you'll be obviously focusing on the key points. So it is about a specific example. They're not asking you to talk generally about how you work with others in a team, for example. They're asking you to draw on a specific example. The I is for issues. So be prepared to be able to kind of highlight what were the key issues that you were faced with in that situation. And then what they really want to do is get inside your head in terms of what your kind of thought or what your approach was in dealing with the issues. So you didn't just go in all guns blazing. You know, you kind of took a kind of measured approach about dealing with the issues. And the A is the action. So what you personally did. So it's really important that you avoid talking about we did this and we did that, but you focus on I, what I contributed, what my impact was, what my kind of solutions were to remedy the situation. I should point out here that about 80% of your answer should be based on, you know, talking about kind of this part, the kind of the actions that you did. And then finally, what was the result? And as I suggested, really talk about reflecting on what you learned and with the benefit of hindsight, you know, what you do differently next time. Okay, so I hope that is a really practical technique and tool that you can go away and work with. And obviously, we can give you further kind of coaching around at one-to-one appointments before the real thing. Okay. So the next kind of questioning that typically could come up at a graduate level interview is around the self-awareness. So it could be around, you know, what you've least or most enjoyed, your strengths or weaknesses, how you challenge yourself. And again, I really want to stress they're not looking for the perfect, you know, candidate. There's no such thing. We've all got our strengths and talents, and we've all got our areas for improvement, and that goes all the way through our lives. So it's really important that you demonstrate, you know, your kind of approach in terms of kind of your professional development, and you're able to take on board constructive feedback and kind of learn from mistakes. So in terms of when I was a recruiter, we always used to ask, you know, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So I thought I'll focus on these questions this morning. So in terms of your strengths, what you really need to focus on is kind of matching yourself into the role. Okay, so remember what we said at the beginning about going back through the job advert. What are the role requirements? What is it that makes you particularly effective in the, you know, either, you know, any university project you've done or in the workplace previously, or extracurricular, you know, in a team, you know, what positive kind of attributes do you have? Where can you add, you know, value? So be really clear about what that is and some evidence to back that up with. Okay. On the contrary, if you're asked what are your weaknesses, or I would prefer to say, you know, what are your areas for improvement, and we all have them, we would strongly suggest that you obviously avoid the role requirements, because you're not going to give matching yourself into the role by saying that, and try and focus on things that are kind of maybe more technical or trainable. So it could be something, for example, like presentation skills, where you've taken every opportunity at university to really gain feedback and practice and hone your skills, but it's something you kind of really like to improve upon further. So that's just an example, but these things are things that you can talk through with us at one-to-one appointments if you're struggling to kind of come up with thoughts on that. So the next kind of type of question is around the kind of commercial awareness, and I really want to emphasize that irrespective of the kind of role that you're applying for, it is really important that you take time to kind of understand the sector and the company that you're applying for. There's so many changes that are happening obviously at the moment in the economy and industry, but there's lots of fantastic resources on our careers website under industry insights. We've got professional body links. There's lots of great websites, for example, the STEM student site there, Grad Cracker. They have some fabulous kind of articles to keep up to date with kind of what's going on, kind of issues and challenges, you know, in the sector. So one of the questions that I used to ask as a recruiter was to do a SWOT analysis of the company or the sector. So it's really important that I think for interview preparation, you think about, you know, doing this and also kind of be prepared to kind of back up your rationale as ever with you know, what your kind of key points are. So don't be afraid to say what you feel the kind of the weaknesses are or the threats are. You know, there's not, as I said, a perfect answer. They're looking for your thought process. So where's your evidence? Where's your thinking? Okay. So on the back of that, there's also, you could have kind of questions around commercial awareness. So you could be asked to talk about business stories that you've read recently and what you found of particular interest, what's really stood out to you personally. So make sure you keep reading high quality, you know, business press. Okay, or high quality kind of social media, you know, sites to keep up to date with, you know, what's going on. What do you feel the main issues are affecting the sector, or tell me about a company you admire and why. So for this kind of question, it's really important, you know, to be able to really drill down on what the issues are. Well, why was it of interest to you? What were the issues, and what is the impact on that company? So once again, you know, these are things that, you know, we can kind of help you with at one-to-one appointments to really kind of hone that kind of that thought, that thinking. So in terms of the interview and giving that kind of professional, enthusiastic impression, it's really important that, you know, we have a really positive first impression, but we have a really positive last impression as well, and that we have thought about, you know, some questions for them. So we wouldn't recommend that you ask any questions, you know, at kind of the interview stage on kind of salary, benefits, holidays. All that can come and be clarified, you know, at an offer stage. The kinds of questions that we would tend to suggest that you ask are things around your early kind of career priorities, particular kind of training opportunities that you will be able to take advantage of in the first kind of 6 months to a year, you know, of the role. You know, again, with a focus that you have on, you know, your professional development and wanting to kind of make a kind of impact and show your worth, you know, early on. You know, do they have a kind of mentor or buddy system to help you really kind of settle in to the role, to the company, and kind of really add value early on. So maybe just a couple of questions, you know, for them. And if in the interview they could have answered the questions, I wouldn't be kind of saying, oh, I don't have any questions, and just leaving it at that. That's again not a very kind of positive ending. So I'd recommend that you really demonstrate that active listening throughout and kind of pick up on something that the interviewers maybe mentioned, and really try and engage them in that topic. So again, that's demonstrating your kind of real enthusiasm and motivation. So for the next kind of last 5 minutes, I'm just going to go through some delivery kind of top tips, really, because obviously we are talking about virtual interviews, and that is something that is, you know, can, you know, make one feel a bit anxious, but actually, you know, there's lots of really good tips. And in fact, in recent surveys, you know, students and graduates have actually reported, you know, really positive experiences of their interview experiences online and virtually. And I think employers have learned a lot over the past year, you know, and are really, really aware of, you know, the conditions and everything, environment that we've all been working in. So, you know, they're really wanting to kind of put you at ease, and they're not trying to catch you out. But here are some kind of delivery top tips. So if it's a pre-recorded video interview, it's important that you take the time to kind of do some practice. You normally get some kind of links through from the employer, and you can practice with the technology in advance to make you feel completely at ease and comfortable. So we would recommend that you practice obviously on camera and watch yourself back. Make sure you're kind of looking straight ahead. You know, they are only human. They're looking for that kind of positive body language, kind of eye contact. It's really important that you obviously dress as well appropriately from top to toe. No pajama bottoms, thank you very much. You know, we are in a professional kind of meeting situation. So be guided, I suppose, by, you know, what visuals you see on their website, their kind of company cultures and things with regard to that, but always err on the side of kind of more conservative dress. So think about preparing your surroundings as well, your background, the light, you know, not too dark, not too light. Are you close enough? Not too close? Obviously, it goes without saying to check your tech beforehand. You know, that we've got good connection, everything's working, the microphone, the camera, and so on. And also, if it's a pre-recorded interview, make sure you're kind of pacing your answers. You're not speaking too quickly, but you're taking time to kind of read the question, give yourself some thinking time, and then, you know, record your answer. So I know that with the pre-recorded interview, sometimes you can kind of re-record answers as well. So just, you know, try and give your best shot. They're not looking for kind of stilted answers. They're looking for your natural response, but just pace yourself and give yourself thinking time. It's really important, as we've been saying, interviewers are only human, whether they're watching this back as a recording or doing it live. It's all about, you know, the positive body language, the eye contact and the smile. That goes such a long way, you know, to really engage the interviewer. And thinking about your kind of posture, I'm going to grab a phrase from our keynote speaker Tuesday, Kirsty Hull's talking about stage school posture. So, you know, even standing up, you know, the kind of shoulders back straight, head up, and really be kind of thinking about that. Even though you might be kind of nervous on the inside, you know, on the outside, you've got that cool, calm exterior. So what is really important is that you build up rapport virtually. You know, they're recruiting, people recruit people. So would you recruit yourself? So, you know, think about really trying your best. I know it feels a bit weird and a bit staged when it's pre-recorded, but try and build up rapport virtually. And it's easier said than done, but to try and relax into the interview, you'll probably find initially, you know, you're a bit nervous and you know, maybe struggle finding some words, but hopefully if you're speaking, you know, with conviction and credibly, because you are really interested, you know, that kind of passion, that motivation will come across, and you'll be building a positive first and last impression. So just in terms of live video interviews, the only additional things to say is to remember the name of the person that's obviously running the session. You can also have a copy of your application CV beside you, just to kind of prompt you as well. And remember to have a glass of water to hand as well, in case you get a dry throat. It's easy to I've got one here in front of me. So yeah, make sure you have that as well. I'm sure the interviewer will too. So we have some fabulous resources on our Grad Futures website, and there's lots of things like the mock interview appointments you can book. There's a video simulator. We've also got the Careers and Graduate Futures website as well, which is down here. So there's fabulous resources on that as well. Another useful resource is Assessment Day. They have some fantastic resources on interviews, which you can also tap into. So I hope you found that really useful. I just want to kind of finally sum up by saying, think about what you say. Also think about how you say it, and really not to underestimate the importance of preparation. So as soon as you get that interview invite, block out your diary, reprioritize your commitments. This is a fantastic learning opportunity for you. They really want you to do well. The employer is not wasting their time just inviting candidates that don't meet the grades. They have really been impressed with you, so they really do want you to do well. They're not trying to catch you out. I finally really wholeheartedly recommend you watch the keynote speaker Kirsty Hulse from 25th of May, all about kind of confidence, energy and motivation in uncertain times. That will really, really help you leaps and bounds for your kind of forthcoming interviews. So a few tips from her to finish with that are so true, to always remember that we all have a blind spot to our own brilliance. We really do. And it is so normal to be nervous, but to try to tame those nerves, to try not let them take over, and to really sit up straight and remember taking big deep breaths, keep breathing, and just try and keep calm. So I just want to finally say that, we're here for you. We're not going anywhere. All the sessions are available. They will be sent round, but all the graduates or soon-to-be graduates, you will have access to our services up to 2 years after graduation. Grad Futures platform. You can access all the events that we will have. You can access all the job vacancies that are updated daily by employers. You can access all our appointments, and there's 24/7 access to all our career resources. So we do have Sarah and myself as a new dedicated team specifically just for graduates. So you've got your own personal contacts there, and you can book a 30 or a 15-minute appointment on Grad Futures to discuss any of the career issues and moving your plans forward. And finally, just to flag up, I know you'll all be getting your LinkedIn profiles up to speed, but we are on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram. So please don't miss out on any fantastic new opportunities. This is updated daily. So just to kind of keep your eyes on there. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Don't know if anybody's got any other questions. So Bethany, you said, is there anything else you'd like to mention about yourself? So I suppose, through your preparation and planning, if there were kind of things like experiences and examples that you had wanted to talk about that they've just not asked about, then it's possible just to kind of reiterate your some of the kind of other qualities and attributes that can help you stand out and set you apart from other candidates. Your kind of drive, your tenacity, your commitment, just these really positive things. It could be, your kind of customer focus and awards you've received. So it is quite nice if you are able to kind of just really kind of finish on a positive note and sell yourself. Or if you feel that particular question hasn't gone as well, again, you can kind of reiterate your kind of strength in a particular area. It's all about kind of, I suppose, engaging with the employer, because questions will come up, I'm sure, in your mind as you're going through. And I would like to emphasize it's a two-way process. The interview, very much about a chance for you to find out, are they the right fit for you, but equally, are you a good fit for them? So hopefully that will kind of clarify your question there, Bethany. Are there any other kind of final questions anyone has before we wrap up? And as I say, recordings will be sent round and slides as well. And yes, absolutely. It's absolutely fine to have your CV at hand in front of you, just to kind of jog your memory with kind of dates and kind of and details things. But obviously, just to have that as just a hand, but really to give the eye contact to the interviewer. So, okay. Any other final burning questions? As I say, I'm more than happy if anyone wants to email me afterwards as well before we wrap up. If not, I will end the session and we will